Good evening, student body. I hope you're enjoying your evening and enjoying your time with small groups in the homes that you're meeting in. I know I've enjoyed dropping by and visiting some of the guy groups so far, and I anticipate doing that this week and the next week that we meet as well. So just a reminder, a couple announcements here. We meet tonight. We don't meet next week formally, and then we meet for the last time this summer 2 weeks from now. So not saying you can't meet in between. I'd love if we can get a game of Ultimate together, play some spike ball, something, go disc golfing. I've been doing some of that with some of you guys who've been hitting me up. So if you want to do something like that, hit me up. If you want to do that with your group, I'm not stopping you. But we're not formally meeting as groups, and I won't have material out for you. So yeah, just remember that. Also, James Project, please remember that we leave at 11. So park in the back part of the parking lot since there's a wedding there. The same day, starting at noon, but make sure that you bring your med form and bring a form of payment, and then I will be scanning for your temperature before we get in the van just so that we're free and clear. So tonight I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about just serving false gods versus serving the true and living God. And I know we've talked a little bit about this, but I want to take a little bit of a different angle. We've been talking lately on Sunday morning, if you're tuning in for that, with Dr. Farnham. He has been talking about the major questions that we have as human beings and what worldviews try to answer some of them and how they do, and how some of those answers seem to make sense maybe individually, but they don't make sense when you have all the answers together. But with Scripture, with Christianity, we have answers to life's deepest questions, and those answers correspond with each other. And Ravi Zacharias has some great sermons out there on it. There are 4 major questions, and they all tie together. He's got great answers out there on that. So if you want to look that up, go ahead. But we're going to talk about one aspect of that is what's the difference between serving a false God and serving the true and living God? And, I mean, you've got your own gods that you serve, or the true and living God, the choices that you make. I've got my own choices that I make. And sometimes a false god could be a good thing, but we worship it instead of God. Like, I could worship Karis instead of worshiping God. Still a false idol at that point. Doesn't mean that I get a divorce. It doesn't mean that I don't talk to her, right? It just means putting things in correct perspective. And when we serve false gods, it has consequences. But when we serve the true and living God, that also has consequences. And I want to dive into a little bit of that tonight. But to do that, I want to read from 1 Kings chapter 18 and starting in verse 17. While you turn there, just listen. I'm going to tell you a little bit of the backdrop of this passage. So 1 Kings 18, verse 17. I've been reading through the Bible or listening to it. I've been listening on the ESV Bible app. And I really enjoyed that. But just to give you a brief overview of what's going on here, this is Israel just went through the kingship. So Saul to David, David to Solomon, and then Solomon, it was split in two because he had honored the Lord. He had asked for wisdom to rule his people. He was given great wealth. He built the temple. God blessed the temple, and as Solomon devoted it to him. But then Solomon, as he got older, he married 700 women and had 300 concubines. And they turned his heart away from the Lord to worship other gods. They built altars to their gods, and he allowed it. And Israel then turned and worshipped other gods as well. So God said, I'm going to split the kingdom in two, but I'm not going to do it during your time. I'm going to do it during your son's time. And I'm going to tell you exactly how it happens. God tells him that's exactly how it happens. The kingdom was split into Judah and Israel. And there were 2 evil kings that took his place. And so God continues to, you go through bad kings and good kings, and God will bless the ones who are honoring him, and he'll take out the ones who are not. And we're in this process now. This is the Israel side with Ahab as king. And there's been a 3-year drought because Ahab, it says multiple times during Ahab's kingship that he provoked the Lord's anger than any king before him. So he did that. His wife, Jezebel, also did that. She was going around and killing the prophets of the Lord, and she was allowing the prophets of Baal and Asherah to eat at her table. So that's kind of the situation, right? So there's a drought. They're actively against the prophets of the Lord, and they are worshiping other gods. Israel is falling for these other gods, and Ahab and Jezebel are right at the front of it, promoting that. So that's a little bit of the backdrop. I'm going to read this, and I want you to think as we're reading through this, okay, serving a false god or serving the true and living God, and what's required of me, and what was required of Ahab and Elijah as we compare these two here. So, verse 17. When Ahab saw Elijah, Ahab said to him, "It is you, you troubler of Israel." And he answered, "I have not troubled Israel, but you have, and your father's house, because you have abandoned the commandments of the Lord and followed the Baals. Now, therefore, send and gather all Israel to me at Mount Carmel, and the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table." So Ahab sent to all the people of Israel and gathered the prophets together at Mount Carmel. And Elijah came near to all the people and said, "How long will you go on limping between two different opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal, then follow him." And the people did not answer him a word. Then Elijah said to the people, "I, even I, only, am left a prophet of the Lord. But Baal's prophets are 450 men. Let 2 bulls be given to us. Let them choose 1 bull for themselves and cut it in pieces and lay it on the wood, but put no fire to it. And I will prepare the other bull and lay it on the wood and put no fire to it." He says, "Go ahead. There are 450 of you. You have first choice at the bull even." And starting in verse 24, "And you call upon the name of your God, and I will call upon the name of the Lord, the God who answers by fire. He is God." So something you have to know about Baal. Baal is considered the god of lightning and fire. And he's basically saying, look, you say your God is the God of fire. I say my God is the God of all things, including fire. God who answers first, we'll worship him. Sound fair? And all the people answered, "It is well spoken." Then Elijah said to the prophets of Baal in verse 25, "Choose for yourselves 1 bull and prepare it first, for you are many, and call upon the name of your God, but put no fire to it." And they took the bull that was given them, and they prepared it and called upon the name of Baal from morning until noon, saying, "Oh, Baal, answer us." But there was no voice, and no one answered. And they limped around the altar that they had made. So limped, that's the second time that this is mentioned in this passage. They were limping. I did a little bit of research. They were limping because part of the practice of worshiping Baal or Asherah was to harm or maim yourself to get their attention. If you were really pleading hard that something would happen, you would cut yourself or you would harm yourself. So they were limping around the altar. And you'll see that a little bit later in this passage. And at noon, Elijah mocked them, saying, "Cry aloud, for he is a god. Either he is musing, or he is relieving himself, or he is on a journey, or perhaps he is asleep and must be awakened." And they cried aloud and cut themselves after their custom with swords and lances, until the blood gushed out upon them. And as midday passed, they raved on until the time of the offering of the oblation, but there was no voice. No one answered, no one paid attention. Then Elijah said to all the people, "Come near to me." And all the people came near to him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord that had been thrown down. Elijah took 12 stones, according to the number of the tribes of the sons of Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord came, saying, "Israel shall be your name." And with the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord. And he made a trench about the altar, as great as would contain 2 seahs of seed. And he put the wood in order, and cut the bull in pieces, and laid it on the wood. And he said, "Fill 4 jars with water, and pour it on the burnt offering and on the wood." Something you want to remember here, there's been a drought. 4 jars of water to be wasted on a sacrifice, kind of a big deal at this point. People are going, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Do it a second time." And they did it a second time. And he said, "Do it a third time." And they did it a third time. And the water ran around the altar and filled the trench also with water. This is sort of the leave no doubt tactic by Elijah. At the time of the offering of the oblation, Elijah the prophet came near and said, "O Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known this day that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, that I have done all these things at your word. Answer me, O Lord, answer me, that this people may know that you, O Lord, are God, and that you have turned their hearts back." Then the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt offering and the wood and the stones and the dust, and licked up the water that was in the trench. And when all the people saw it, they fell on their faces and said, "The Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is God." And Elijah said to them, "Seize the prophets of Baal, let not one of them escape." And they seized them, and Elijah brought them down to the brook Kishon and slaughtered them there. Crazy, crazy story. So you've got 450 and then 400 of Asherah against one. But that one was the prophet of the living God. I want to compare the two. The prophets of Baal and how they worshipped their God, and then Elijah and how he worshipped God. So that's why I have the whiteboard here tonight. My first take of this, I had to grab the markers because I forgot them. But let's compare them. Take notes if you will, if you got paper and pen available. But I'm going to write down the difference here that I see and follow along. All right, so we got Baal. Oh, maybe you can't see that. Hopefully you can. You got Baal. You've got God. I'll write as thick as I can. What did it take to worship Baal? They were crying out to him, right? Okay? They were cutting themselves. And they were limping around. But nobody answered. And Elijah sort of goes, oh, maybe he's relieving himself. Maybe he's going to the bathroom. Maybe he's sleeping. But to serve the living God, what did it cost Elijah? Because it's not just, oh, Elijah's the man of God, so he's right. What did it cost Elijah? Okay, they were killing the prophets of the Lord. And he went to the guy who said, let's kill the prophets of the Lord. And he said, gather me all the people of Israel together at Mount Carmel. And he did it. This is how you know the Lord is working. But what did Elijah have to do? He had to stand up. He had to stand up against 850 other prophets, 450 of Baal and 400 of Asherah. And he had the faith to know that God was going to come through. And he proved it to all of Israel. So let's break this down. This is Israel. This is many, many years ago. How about you? How about me? How about all of us? What are some false idols that we serve today? People, good grades, lust, pornography, you name it. We serve all these other things. But do you know what it costs us? It costs us pain, misfortune. It costs us our passion and zeal for things that are true in life. It'll end up costing you everything. And what did these guys get? I mean, they died. But what did they got? What did they get? They had no answer, no response, no reply. Their answer was loneliness. They were alone. They thought they were worshiping a God. Other people thought they were true prophets, so there must have been something there they were able to convince the people of. But then they realized, you know what? This isn't true. I'm not serving the true God. I am alone. But the cost of serving God, not easy. Against popular belief. Had to stand up against everybody else. I had to stand out and be willing to do what God had asked him to do. But in the end, he lived. Couldn't say the same for prophets of Baal. He served the living and true God. I don't know about you, but I'd rather than go through all of these things and get nothing, I'd rather do some hard things in life for things that truly matter and last. And I hope that you leave with that tonight. That convicts you. Not only personally of, am I worshiping a false God? Honestly guys, summer is so hard not to do that. We have our free time, and then we do the things that we want, and then we pursue them, and then they become false idols. So, look, I've been you before, okay? I still struggle with some of those things. False idols are everywhere, but how are we going to take our hearts and our minds and bring them to the true and the living God and stand out and stand up for the true and living God and be willing to live with those consequences? And then think beyond that. Think about the people who aren't worshiping the true and living God. They are worshiping a false God. It's costing them everything, pain, and they end up lonely, by themselves, experiencing all of these things. There are people like that all around you, all around me. Are we looking for those people? Are we thinking and praying for those people? God wants your heart and your mind. He wants all of you, but he wants all of them as well. And are you willing to do what Elijah did, to stand up and say, I know I serve the true and the living God? And are you willing to do what it takes to reach that person? I want to challenge you to think about that person. I know I harp on this a lot, but guys, in an age of information, I can give you information, but it's not as impactful. You need to experience the conversations that you can have with people who don't agree with you. And you can understand for sure that God really is the true and living God. The way that you live is according to reality. When you look outside, you believe what is true about the world. And you have that message to live by and to share. And I want you to experience that. Not just hear it from me, hear it from your leader, hear it in group discussions. You need to experience that. So I want to challenge you. This is our second to last message for the summer for student body. You have a few months ahead of you before I'm going to mention the S word, school starts back up again. There ought to be somebody in your life that you're thinking, they've got to hear this. I have got to share it. You may be the only person in their life that's willing to say it. Elijah was the only prophet willing to stand up and do this. I want to challenge you to think about that and pray about that as you close tonight in your groups.